We are very close to getting the first update to Monster Hunter Rise. I have given my opinions on what I think of the game and its issues in prior videos, but now I want to move on and continue exploring what the Greatsword has to offer in this game. As we get more updates, we will get more gear and stronger weapons, so I expect the information in this video to become old rather quickly. That said, it is important to establish a beginning so that we can accurately gauge the evolution of the Monster Hunter Rise Greatsword. As such, in this video, we are going to figure out what is the best Greatsword at this time during the launch period of Monster Hunter Rise. Let's get to work. First and foremost, please be advised that there is a lot of content here. There will be mathematical calculations, there will be sample studies of damage, there will be comparisons, and, of course, there will be conclusions. To better organize all of this content, I have created timestamps in the description of this video. Make sure that you skip to the part that you're most interested in. If you just want to know the final answer, move on to the conclusions. But if you're here for the ride, then strap on because it's going to be an interesting one. With that out of the way, we need to talk about some disclaimers. Please understand that I am not a mathematician. My profession is a different one. That said, I am very good at understanding logical concepts and extrapolating them from abstract knowledge to specific application. This means that everything I will explain to you here is based on facts. That said, I may make mistakes. If you find such a mistake in this video, please let me know in the comments below. We are here to become better, and knowledge is the first step to that. We can be much better, much faster working together. Next, the objective of this video is to find what we can agree is the best Greatsword at this time in terms of damage that it can deal to a monster. I am not here to tell you what Greatsword you need to use. No one should tell you what you need to use. You need to decide what you want to use and use it. What I want is for you to have this information so that you can make an informed decision. This is a game, and you need to use whatever makes you happy for whatever reason. There is no arguing this. With the pleasantries out of the way, time to dive into the meat and potatoes of this delicious stew. So what is the best Greatsword during the launch period of Monster Hunter Rise? If there is anything that we can agree on, it is that there are 3 candidates to this title. In alphabetical order, we have the Abominable Greatsword from Gos-Harag, the Dark of Night from Nargacuga, and the Tigrex Greatsword from Tigrex. The Abominable Greatsword boasts a glorious 230 raw attack, the highest in the game so far for Greatswords, 30 hits of natural blue sharpness, and 20 raw ice elemental attack. Its affinity sits at a natural negative 15% that we turn into negative 11% thanks to the affinity boost 1 in the rampage slot. Finally, it gives us a level 2 decoration slot. The Dark of Night comes in at 180 raw attack that we can turn into 188 thanks to attack boost 3 in the rampage slot. It has 20 hits of natural white sharpness and the incredible natural affinity of 35%. Finally, this sword also comes with a level 2 decoration slot. Last but not least, the Tigrex Greatsword swings in with 210 raw attack that we make 218 thanks to the attack boost 3 from its rampage slot. It has 20 hits of natural white sharpness and a natural affinity of negative 15%. As for slots, we get one level 1 decoration slot. These are the basic stats of each weapon, but of course, we also have to consider the builds that we will be using to test them. I have made a build for each weapon that I believe increases the efficiency of each weapon to its maximum at this time. I will not be showing each complete build in this video. Please check the description below to find links to a complete breakdown of each build that I am using for each weapon. That said, I will be showing the full list of skills and the final stats of each weapon. But before doing that, we need to talk about talismans. Getting talismans depends on your luck and on which table you were placed on, and it is impossible to control. Talismans have a great impact on builds, so having a better talisman will definitely improve your builds with these weapons. In order to keep everything consistent and controlled, I will be using the same talisman for every build. Also, it is the minimum requirement possible in regards to talismans to make sure that as many hunters as possible can take advantage of these builds and are able to reach these damage values. The talisman I am using is the one you're able to see now. It is a Fatal Tempest talisman with 1 point in weakness exploit and 1 level 2 decoration slot. As I said, this is the minimum requirement for talismans to be able to take advantage of all of these builds. If you have anything that is better, good, you will be able to improve these builds. But these tests will be done so that as many hunters as possible can replicate these results and use these builds on their own hunts. Moving on to the skills that each weapon will use, starting with the Abominable Greatsword, we have the following: Attack Boost 7, Critical Eye 3, Weakness Exploit 3, Focus 3, Speed Sharpening 3, Marathon Runner 1, Offensive Guard 1, Defense Boost 1, Flinch Free 1. The Dark of Night will use the following skills: Attack Boost 4, Critical Boost 3, Weakness Exploit 3, Focus 3, Speed Sharpening 3, Flinch Free 3, Latent Power 1, Offensive Guard 1, Defense Boost 1. And finally, the Tigrex Greatsword will use the following skills: Attack Boost 7, Weakness Exploit 3, Focus 3, Speed Sharpening 3, Critical Eye 2, Marathon Runner 1, Offensive Guard 1, Defense Boost 1, Stun Resistance 1, and Flinch Free 1. Now, I need to make one last note before showing the final stats of each Greatsword. These damage values and tests were done with the Power Charm and the Power Talon in my inventory. These are the only buffs that I used, and it leaves us with the following final stats. The Abominable Greatsword will end up with a total of 298 raw attack, 20 ice element attack, and 4% affinity. That turns into 54% affinity when hitting a monster's weak spot. The Dark of Night will end up with a total of 239 raw affinity and 35% affinity that turns into 85% when hitting a monster's weak point and 95% if Latent Power is active. The Tigrex Greatsword ends up with a total of 284 raw attack and negative 5% affinity, which turns into 45% affinity when hitting a monster's weak spot. This, gentlemen, is the basis of our testing. We will be using these greatswords with these skills and these final stats. All of our calculations and experiments will be using these stats. This is our control information. The conclusions we obtained will be in correlation to these specific greatswords with these specific stats. As mentioned before, better talismans will make better builds, which might change some of the results. But I will repeat myself. I want this to be usable to as many hunters as possible, so I will keep a minimum requirement talisman for all of my testing. The time has come to begin our experiment. We have the objective established. We have our conditions and our disclaimers. And we have our greatswords and their final stats. The first test that we will do is theoretical and requires the bulk of mathematical calculations. We will first establish which is the best greatsword on paper through the calculation of each greatsword's EFR. EFR stands for effective roll. You may also know it as EFA, which stands for effective attack. Either nomenclature is correct, but I will continue to use EFR. Regardless of its name, EFR is the average consistent damage that a weapon does throughout one complete hunt. To be clear, it doesn't calculate the highest damage, but the most consistent highest damage. It represents that doing good damage throughout the whole hunt is better than doing the best damage on a few hits and low damage during the rest of the hunt. Remember, consistent results are better than spike results. To get the EFR of each weapon, we must do a mathematical calculation. The formula for EFR is as follows: total attack multiplied by sharpness modifier multiplied by critical modifier. To get the critical modifier of each weapon, we have to take the weapon's affinity, multiply it by the critical damage modifier, and add 1. The higher the EFR, the better the weapon. We will use this formula to calculate the EFR of each of the 3 greatswords we are comparing under 2 situations. First, hitting a monster's weak spot, and second, not hitting a monster's weak spot. Before we continue with these calculations, I have to make a very important note about elemental damage. Bottom line, elemental damage is a statistical irrelevance. It does not matter. Elemental damage equals to about 1% of the total damage that a greatsword does. It is just not good on this weapon. I am sorry to say that if you're using elemental skills on a greatsword, you are losing a lot of damage. Please continue doing what you do, but keep it in consideration. For this reason, EFR calculations will remain focused on raw damage. Does this mean that the abominable greatsword from Gos Harag will have a disadvantage? Not really. Like I said, elemental damage is about 1% of the total damage that a greatsword does. When we start testing damage values, it will be included for the sake of completion. But right now, it makes no difference whatsoever to the result. Starting with the calculations, the abominable greatsword has a total attack of 298, and the blue sharpness gives it a modifier of 1.2. The critical modifier for hitting a monster's weak spot is 54% affinity, thanks to the weakness exploit 3, multiplied by the standard critical damage modifier of 0.25, and we add 1. This means that the critical modifier of the abominable greatsword is 1.135 when hitting a monster's weak spot. As a result, the EFR of the abominable greatsword when it hits a monster's weak spot is 298 multiplied by 1.2 multiplied by 1.135. The total is 405.876. Let's call it 405.9 EFR. The critical modifier for not hitting a monster's weak spot is 4% affinity multiplied by the standard critical damage modifier of 0.25, and we add 1. This means that the critical modifier for the abominable greatsword is 1.01 when not hitting a monster's weak spot. As a result, the EFR of the Abominable Greatsword when it does not hit a monster's weak spot is 298 multiplied by 1.2 multiplied by 1.01. The total is 361.176. Let's call it 361.2. Next are the calculations for the Dark of Night. It has a total attack of 239 and a white sharpness modifier of 1.32. The critical modifier for hitting a monster's weak spot is 85% affinity thanks to Weakness Exploit 3, multiplied by the critical damage of 0.4 thanks to the Critical Boost 3 skill, and we add 1. This means that the critical modifier for the Dark of Night is 1.34 when hitting a monster's weak spot. As a result, the EFR of the Dark of Night when it hits a monster weak spot is 239 multiplied by 1.32 multiplied by 1.34. The total is 422.7432. Let's call it 422.7 EFR. The critical modifier for not hitting a monster's weak spot is 35% affinity multiplied by the critical damage modifier of 0.4 thanks to the skill Critical Boost 3, and we add 1. This means that the critical modifier for the Dark of Night is 1.14 when not hitting a monster's weak spot. As a result, the EFR of the Dark of Night when it does not hit a monster's weak spot is 239 multiplied by 1.32 multiplied by 1.14. The total is 359.6472. Let's call it 359.6 EFR. And finally, the calculations for the Tigrex Greatsword. It has a total attack of 284 and a white sharpness modifier of 1.32. The critical modifier for hitting a monster's weak spot is 45% affinity thanks to Weakness Exploit 3 multiplied by the standard critical damage modifier of 0.25, and we add 1. This means that the critical modifier for the Tigrex Greatsword is 1.1125 when hitting a monster's weak spot. As a result, the EFR of the Tigrex Greatsword when it hits a monster's weak spot is 284 multiplied by 1.32 multiplied by 1.1125. The total is 417.054. Let's call it 417 EFR. The critical modifier for not hitting a monster's weak spot is -5% affinity, multiplied by the standard critical hit damage modifier of 0.25, and we add 1. This means that the critical modifier for the Tigrex Greatsword is 0.9875 when not hitting a monster's weak spot. As a result, the EFR of the Tigrex Greatsword when it does not hit a monster's weak spot is 284 multiplied by 1.32 multiplied by 0.9875. The total is 370.194. Let's call it 370.2 EFR. As you can see, on paper, the Dark of Night, the Nargacuga Greatsword, has the highest EFR if it manages to get a critical hit. On the other hand, if it does not get a critical hit, it is the Tigrex Greatsword that has the highest EFR. We will use this information in order to reach our conclusions. That said, we must move on to the next phase of testing. After going through the more theoretical part of this experiment, it is important that we move on to the practice and we see how these greatswords perform at actually doing damage. To see this, we are going to test the damage values of 6 attacks from each greatsword on the training mode dummy. We are going to be hitting the head of the dummy with a level 3 draw slash, a level 3 strong slash, and a level 3 true charge slash, and we will record the damage that these attacks do on a critical hit and on a standard hit. Let's begin. On a standard hit, a level 3 draw slash from the Abominable Greatsword will do 498 damage. The same attack from the Dark of Night will do 431 damage, and the Tigrex Greatsword will do 512 damage. On a critical hit, a level 3 draw slash from the Abominable Greatsword will do 620 damage. The same attack from the Dark of Night will do 603 damage, and the Tigrex Greatsword will do 640 damage. Moving on to the level 3 strong slash, on a standard hit, the Abominable Greatsword will do 549 damage. The same attack from the Dark of Night will do 472 damage, and the Tigrex Greatsword will do 560 damage. On a critical hit, the level 3 strong slash from the Abominable Greatsword will do 682 damage. The same attack from the Dark of Night will do 660 damage, and the Tigrex Greatsword will do 701 damage. Finally, when doing a level 3 true charge slash on a standard hit, the Abominable Greatsword will do 1238 damage. The same attack from the Dark of Night will do 1083 damage, and the Tigrex Greatsword will do 1287 damage. On a critical hit, the level 3 true charge slash from the Abominable Greatsword will do 1545 damage. The same attack from the Dark of Night will do 1516 damage, and then the Tigrex Greatsword will do 1608 damage. As you can see, when it comes to pure damage numbers, the Tigrex Greatsword is king. This greatsword deals the highest amount of damage possible. On the other hand, the Dark of Night, the Nargacuga Greatsword, dealt the least amount of damage during the testing. How is it that the Dark of Night, with the highest EFR, has dealt the least amount of damage of all greatswords? That is a question related to consistent damage versus spike damage, and we will answer it in our conclusions. We have done the theoretical calculations of EFR to understand which greatsword will provide us with the most damage throughout a full hunt. We have also done some damage testing to see how much damage each greatsword actually did to the training dummy. It is now time to compile this information and draw our conclusions. Which of these greatswords is the best one at this time? Let's take a look. When it comes to EFR, the Dark of Night is king. It has the highest, most consistent damage that we can get throughout a full hunt. On the other hand, when it comes to pure damage values, the Tigrex Greatsword does the highest amount of damage in the game at this time. So now we have to answer what is better, higher damage or more consistent damage. To figure this out, let's run an example. If the Dark of Night, the Nargacuga Greatsword, hits the training dummy 10 times with a level 3 true charge slash at 85% affinity, it will most likely get a critical hit 9 times out of 10. On the other hand, the Tigrex Greatsword with 45% affinity will probably hit the training dummy with a critical hit 5 times out of 10 with the same attack. So now, Let's fill out the damage values for these hits and add them up. As you can see, the Nargacuga Greatsword will do a total of 14,727 damage, while the Tigrex Greatsword will do 14,475 damage. In the end, the Nargacuga Greatsword deals more damage. To be exact, it deals 2% more damage. We can see that when it comes to damage, consistency is the best, and EFR is the best measurement to find out which weapon is considered better. As such, the best greatsword in Monster Hunter Rise during launch is the Dark of Night, the Nargacuga Greatsword. The main reason is because of how consistent it is at getting critical hits. If you are looking to deal the most damage in the most consistent way possible to make hunts go as quickly as possible, you need to use the Dark of Night, the Nargacuga Greatsword. With all of that said, please keep in mind that what may be considered to be the best in general may not necessarily be the best for you. We have reached the conclusion that the Nargacuga Greatsword is the best one, but that is only if you try your best to keep on hitting the monster's weak points. Maybe you are playing with friends, or maybe you are just learning to play the game and cannot hit weak points consistently yet. That is okay. In these cases, maybe the best greatsword for you is the Tigrex Greatsword. While the Nargacuga Greatsword is objectively the best one, it is also by a very small margin. Honestly, it does not make that much of a difference. What I'm trying to say is that you can use whatever weapon you want for whatever reason. Remember, this is a game and you have to have fun, because if you don't, then why are you playing in the first place? Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I get to see you on the next one.